The dawn had barely touched Rome when whispers began to spread. The bells of St. Peter's Basilica rang with the joyous rhythm of a feast day, but with the solemn cadence reserved for great loss. The Vatican had announced the passing of Pope Francis. For most of the world, the statement was simple. He had died in his sleep. The cause a heart weakened by age. But for those within the Vatican walls, there was something heavier in the air that morning, a hush that clung to the marble halls. I remember watching the broadcast that day. The anchor's voice was steady, but the eyes they lingered a moment too long on the camera, as if silently telling us, there's more to this story. Witnesses claimed unusual events in the days leading up to his death. The Pope, once a figure of warmth and accessibility, had withdrawn to his private chapel, murmuring in an archaic Latin few could decipher. A personal physician was replaced without explanation, and when his body was finally seen by the faithful, they noted an unsettling pallor and markings near the neck. Now, a skeptic might say, these are the inventions of grief, of minds seeking meaning in tragedy. But history teaches us that when rituals are rushed, when traditions are altered, the human imagination starts to stitch its own narrative. And so, on that morning, the Catholic world mourned, but in the quieter corners, it also began to wonder. If you're fascinated by mythology, hidden prophecies, and mysteries that defy explanation, subscribe to Tales Mythology and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to like this video to support the channel and share it with friends who dare to explore the truth. The light of truth is only found by those brave enough to seek it, and you are one of them. The story of Pope Francis's death intersects with one of the most enigmatic prophecies in Christian lore, the prophecy of the popes, attributed to St. Malachy, a 12th century Irish archbishop. Legend says Malachy, during a visit to Rome, had a vision of all the popes from his time to the very end of the church. Each was described in a cryptic Latin motto, some poetic, some ominous. The list ends with a single name, Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman, who would lead the church through great tribulations, after which the city of 7 hills would fall, and the final judgment would come. For centuries, these mottos have been linked, sometimes eerily, to the papacies they supposedly predicted. Pope Francis's motto was Gloria Olivae, the glory of the olive, a symbol of peace and of the Benedictine order. Though Francis was a Jesuit, his papal name honored St. Francis of Assisi, who had deep ties to Benedictine tradition. Does this make him the penultimate pope? Some believe it's coincidence. Others feel the timeline closing. I have met people who keep the prophecy on their fridge, clipped from old newspapers, highlighted, annotated. One elderly priest I once spoke with told me, it's not about knowing the end. It's about watching for signs, so you're never asleep when it comes. The next chapter begins beneath the surface of Rome, in the catacombs. This conclave, unlike any in centuries, would not take place in the Sistine Chapel. Instead, it would be held in the subterranean halls of St. Sixtus, a decision justified publicly as symbolic humility, but the preparations were anything but symbolic. 3 days of purification rites, sealed instructions left by Pope Francis himself, and a strict ban on daylight appearances for certain cardinals. Some factions were said to circulate private documents describing physical signs by which the true chosen one would be recognized. We think of conclaves as solemn but straightforward affairs, locked doors, prayers, votes. Yet here, the very location shifts the tone. Underground, surrounded by the bones of saints and martyrs, rituals take on a different weight. I once toured a section of the Roman catacombs, not the Vatican's, but still ancient, still quiet in a way that presses on your chest. The guide whispered the entire time, as if speaking too loudly would stir the walls themselves. If this is the atmosphere in which the next pope will be chosen, imagine the psychology of those casting their votes. Among the Vatican's most guarded treasures are manuscripts the public rarely hears about. One, according to certain historians, is the Libramorphosis Papalus. It describes a transformation, a merging of spiritual and physical essence, that the final pope would undergo. The imagery is rich, a chalice filled with a dark, ancient substance, the black blood of the primordial guardians, a cruciform staff with a hidden chamber at its base, the act of drawing blood, not to take life, but to complete a bond. Skeptics point out that many religious artifacts have elaborate origin stories to give them weight, but what catches my attention is not whether these stories are literally true. It's how they echo across cultures. Blood rituals appear in countless traditions, from tribal initiations to royal coronations. They're about continuity, belonging, transformation. When I interviewed a cultural anthropologist years ago, she told me, rituals are designed to change the participant's identity, sometimes in their own mind, sometimes in the eyes of the community, and sometimes, if you believe the stories in reality itself. In this case, reality is in the eye of the faithful. If the Pope emerges looking subtly different, eyes lighter, posture altered, belief may do the rest. In the weeks after Francis's funeral, strange reports began to surface. A pale figure spotted in the gardens after hours, candle flames springing to life unlit, unverified audio of Latin murmurs coming from sealed crypts. Now, any seasoned historian will tell you, churches are magnets for ghost stories. The architecture itself seems to hold echoes, but these events gained traction because of who was involved. Cardinals avoiding daylight, staff refusing to speak after sudden illnesses, security measures meant to detect what exactly. I recall visiting an old cathedral in Spain years ago. During an evening service, the electric lights flickered and failed, leaving only candles. The air seemed to thicken, and though I knew it was just the power grid, the moment carried a charge that made everyone move just a little closer together. That's the nature of atmospheres like these. They invite interpretation, and interpretation is the seed of legend. 3 names rise to the top of speculation. A cardinal with ties to esoteric orders, rumored to practice ancient rites. Another whose lineage traces to families once accused of vampirism. A third, a public favorite, yet strangely ageless in appearance. These descriptions might sound like fiction, but they're rooted in historical patterns. Royal and religious lines have often woven their identities with myth, whether to inspire reverence or to intimidate. A historian once told me, if people believe you're more than human, they'll accept more than they otherwise would. To bring these events down to earth, I share 3 stories, fictionalized composites inspired by interviews and accounts. The midnight cleaner, a janitor in the Vatican who, during night duties, swore he saw a tall figure in robes pass through a locked door without opening it. He never returned to work. The pilgrim couple, 2 travelers from Poland who kept vigil at the Pope's tomb and heard whispers in a language they didn't know, until they later discovered it was medieval Latin. The scholar, a researcher studying papal relics, who noticed subtle changes in a portrait of a reigning pope, as if the features had been quietly altered over time. These are not proofs. They are reflections of how humans experience mystery. Whether or not the next pope fulfills a prophecy, whether or not there is truth to the whispers of vampirism, the real power lies in how these stories shape us. Fear can cloud reason, but wonder can open it. The takeaway: approach mysteries with curiosity, not panic. Look for truth, but don't fear the shadows. They are where our most enduring stories are born.